We often believe that suffering comes from the obvious: loss, fear, failure, anger. But what if the real obstacle to our peace lies somewhere more subtle, more disguised, more accepted? What if the most persistent forms of suffering are born not from what we can see, but from the subtle desires that live beneath our awareness? The desire to be seen, the craving to be right, the need to be loved, the wish to be enlightened. These aren't sins, they aren't even bad, they're just hidden, and in their subtlety, they bind us. Today, we'll journey into the world of subtle desire, not to reject desire, but to see it clearly. To bring to light the invisible threads that tug at our minds and keep us from resting deeply in the present. Let's begin. 1. The illusion of progress, the craving to evolve. In the modern spiritual journey, there is often an unspoken pressure to keep evolving, to constantly heal, grow, and achieve higher states of consciousness. We might meditate daily, read countless teachings, and strive to be more mindful, compassionate, or awakened. On the surface, this looks noble, but underneath there is often a hidden current, a subtle craving to be someone other than who we are right now. This is the illusion of spiritual progress, an inner thirst not for truth, but for transformation. We may find ourselves asking, am I becoming more awakened yet? Am I purifying my karma fast enough? Am I transcending my ego completely? These questions may appear spiritual, but they're often driven by bhava-taṇhā, one of the 3 forms of craving the Buddha described. Bhava-taṇhā is the thirst for becoming, the subtle desire to become something better, purer, or more spiritually evolved. It masks itself as discipline, but it's still a form of grasping. In the Dhamma, the Buddha reminds us that craving, even for spiritual development, is a trap. Every time we chase progress, we subtly reject the present. We say, this version of me is not enough. But true liberation doesn't lie in evolving endlessly. It lies in ending the cycle of becoming. Enlightenment is not a prize at the end of effort. It is what remains when we stop running, stop striving, and rest fully in the moment. The heart of Buddhism is non-attachment, not only to pleasure or possessions, but also to spiritual identity and goals. Even the path itself is to be abandoned, like a raft that carries you across the river but is not clung to afterward. Let go of the desire to improve. Stop measuring your journey by milestones. Sit, breathe, and simply witness. You may discover that the peace you're chasing has always been here, quiet, undemanding, and patiently waiting beneath all striving. 2. The desire to be seen, craving for validation. In today's hyper-connected world, visibility has become a kind of currency. We post, share, and perform, often without realizing it. Even in the realm of spiritual practice, the ego finds clever ways to seek validation. A deep human longing quietly drives this, the desire to be seen. This craving can show up subtly. We might share a spiritual insight, hoping it inspires others, but secretly we want praise. We might post a serene meditation photo on social media, presenting an image of calm. Or we might drop our favorite Dharma quote into conversation, not just to share wisdom, but to be admired for knowing it. This is a form of taṇhā, or craving, particularly the craving for mana, a Buddhist term that can be understood as conceit or ego identity. Not necessarily arrogance, but the persistent need to compare and position ourselves even within the spiritual hierarchy. The Buddha warned against this deeply ingrained pattern. In the Sutta Nipata, he advised disciples to practice in silence, humility, and simplicity, not for the world to applaud, but to quietly purify the mind. The most dangerous forms of craving aren't loud or obvious. They're the ones we justify in the name of growth. In many Buddhist traditions, especially in Zen and Theravada, the concept of practicing in the dark is revered. This means engaging in deep, authentic practice without needing to show or share it with others. Not because sharing is wrong, but because needing to be seen distorts our intention. Ask yourself, would I still meditate if no one knew I was doing it? Can I learn in silence without proving what I know? Am I okay with being invisible, if it means being free? Freedom arises when we stop outsourcing our worth to others' approval. When we stop curating our identity, even our spiritual one, for the world's applause. The Dharma encourages us to turn inward. Real validation does not come from likes, followers, or compliments. It comes from self-awareness, from deepening presence, from quiet integrity. When you no longer need to be seen, you begin to see clearly, not your image, not your reputation, but your true nature, silent, unshakable, and free. 3. The need to be right. Attachment to identity. Have you ever felt that inner tension when someone challenges your beliefs, especially spiritual ones? Perhaps it's a subtle tightening in the chest, or a need to explain yourself, or the quiet urge to prove you're on the right path. This is the craving to be right, and it's one of the most deeply rooted obstacles on the path to inner peace. This form of craving doesn't always appear as arrogance. Often it disguises itself as conviction or clarity. We may believe we're simply sharing the truth, but underneath there's often a fear of being wrong, or worse, of not being seen as wise or awakened. In Buddhism, this is related to ditthi upadana, or clinging to views. The Buddha repeatedly emphasized that attachment to fixed opinions, even spiritual ones, can become a subtle prison. In the Sabbasava Sutta, he warns that speculative views give rise to inner disturbance and further entanglement in suffering. And it's not just about ideas, it's about identity. We often tie our self-worth to our knowledge. I follow the true Dharma. I understand mindfulness better than most. My path is more advanced or pure. This is the egoic mind using spirituality to build a new self-image. It creates a persona, the wise one, the conscious one, the awakened one. But the stronger this identity becomes, the more we resist anything that challenges it. The Dharma teaches that liberation is not about being correct. It's about being free from the need to be correct. Right view, as described in the Noble Eightfold Path, is not about holding on to beliefs. It's about seeing reality clearly, free from ego and distortion. And sometimes that clarity means admitting we don't know, that we're still learning, that our truth can evolve. There is profound humility in not knowing. When we release the need to win an argument or defend our spiritual identity, the heart softens. We become open, curious, alive. Ask yourself, can I listen without preparing a rebuttal? Can I hold my beliefs lightly? Can I prioritize peace over being right? In the end, wisdom is not about being right. It's about being real. And reality doesn't need defending. It just is. 4. The hunger for experience, craving the spiritual high. In the early stages of a spiritual journey, many practitioners encounter powerful moments, fleeting glimpses of peace, deep clarity, blissful stillness, or a profound sense of unity with all life. These moments are beautiful. They give us hope. They remind us of what's possible. But there's a hidden danger. We start to chase these experiences. We begin to crave the spiritual high. This is the desire for special states of consciousness, a subtle, intoxicating form of spiritual attachment. It's not the craving for worldly pleasures, but for elevated inner states that affirm we are getting somewhere spiritually. You might notice this craving in moments like wishing your meditation today felt as peaceful as it did last week, feeling discouraged when your practice is ordinary or flat, comparing your current state to past insights, longing to return. This is where we fall into a trap the Buddha warned about, upadana, or attachment, even to the wholesome. In many suttas, particularly the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha cautioned his disciples about becoming attached to jhana, the deep meditative absorptions. While these states are powerful and can support the path, clinging to them becomes a new form of bondage. It's still ego, just wearing spiritual robes. What's the problem with craving spiritual highs? First, it creates aversion to the ordinary. We begin to subtly reject boredom, discomfort, or even neutrality. We divide our experience. Bliss equals good, restlessness equals failure. But the Dhamma is not about achieving bliss. It's about awakening to the nature of all things, even the uncomfortable and mundane. Second, it leads to identification with progress. We might think, I felt deep stillness last night, I'm advancing. But then, when the mind is noisy, we assume, I'm falling behind. This reinforces the illusion of a self that moves forward or backward, which is exactly what the Buddha urged us to see through. And finally, it becomes an addiction, one we don't recognize. Like a spiritual version of a drug, we begin to chase the next hit of insight, mistaking temporary states for permanent liberation. The truth is, true presence does not discriminate between peak and plateau. In fact, the heart of Buddhist meditation, vipassana or insight, is about seeing clearly, not feeling good. It's about observing whatever arises without grasping or resisting. So what's the antidote to this craving? It's cultivating equanimity, the calm, even-minded awareness that treats all experiences as equal. Whether you're resting in deep stillness or struggling with monkey mind, the practice is the same. Observe, allow, let be. There's a story of a monk who had mastered deep meditative absorptions. He could sit in perfect stillness for hours, experiencing states of bliss and light. When he visited the Buddha, expecting praise, the Buddha instead said, "Even this must be let go." The monk was shocked. Even the bliss of jhana? The Buddha replied, "Even the highest states are conditioned. What arises will pass. Freedom lies beyond even bliss." The monk understood. He let go not just of worldly craving, but of spiritual pride. and through that release, he awakened. Craving the highs blinds us to the holiness of the mundane. True presence embraces both the peak and the valley, without preference. It's not what we feel, but how we meet it that reveals freedom. The Buddha used the image of a lotus in the mud. It doesn't bloom by escaping the dirt, but by rising through it. Similarly, we don't awaken by clinging to bliss. We awaken by staying grounded in all of life. Ask yourself, can I sit with silence that isn't special? Can I appreciate presence without fireworks? Can I be content with what is right now? The most profound realization is not found in dazzling states. It is found in the simplicity of this moment. Not altered, not improved, just fully seen. That is freedom. 5. The longing to be loved, subtle emotional clinging. At the heart of almost every human being lies a simple, tender longing to be loved, to be seen, to be held in unconditional acceptance. This desire is so natural, so deeply human, that we rarely question it. And yet, from a Buddhist perspective, even this seemingly innocent longing can become a source of suffering when we cling to it unconsciously. This is the subtle emotional craving for love and connection. It may not be loud or dramatic like romantic obsession or dependency, but it quietly shapes our thoughts, our relationships, and even our spiritual path. You might notice it in moments like these, feeling uneasy when someone you care about withdraws emotionally, shaping your behavior or beliefs to maintain someone's affection, feeling incomplete when you're alone, even briefly, craving validation or closeness from a spiritual teacher or community. This form of subtle emotional clinging is a variation of taṇhā, the Buddhist term for craving, and in particular, kama-taṇhā, or the desire for sensual and emotional pleasure. We seek soothing through connection, affirmation, and emotional closeness, not realizing that when we attach to these experiences, we are building dependency. And dependency, even in its gentlest form, is a kind of bondage. The Buddha understood this deeply. In the Kula Dukkha Sutta, he described how attachment to people and feelings leads to grief, sorrow, and despair when those people or experiences inevitably change or fade. Why? Because all things, relationships included, are anicca, impermanent. This doesn't mean we must become cold or detached. In fact, Buddhism does not ask us to suppress love. It invites us to liberate love from need. In many Mahayana traditions, especially Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, the highest form of love is metta, loving kindness that is selfless, unattached, and unconditional. True metta does not say, "I love you because you love me back." It simply loves. But when our desire to be loved becomes a condition for our peace, when we need others to love us so we can feel okay, that's where subtle emotional clinging forms. And with it, the seeds of suffering are planted. Even on the spiritual path, this desire hides itself well. We might seek praise from our teacher to feel on track. We might try to impress a spiritual community so we belong. We might fear being alone on the path, thinking we need others to walk with us. Yet, according to the Buddha, the highest freedom, nibbana, is a state not dependent on anyone or anything. It's not loneliness, it's spaciousness. It's the fullness that arises when nothing is missing and no external source is needed to complete us. You may ask, But isn't it natural to want connection? Yes, absolutely. We are wired for connection. But what Buddhism teaches is the difference between loving from fullness versus loving from lack. When we love from fullness, we give freely. We listen without needing to be heard in return. We care without control. We enjoy the presence of others without clinging to their permanence. When we love from lack, we hold tight. We fear loss. We manipulate unconsciously. We confuse affection with approval and intimacy with self-worth. The practice, then, is not to eliminate love, but to purify it. Ask yourself, can I love without needing to be loved back? Can I rest peacefully even when I'm not receiving affection? Can I be alone without feeling abandoned? These are not just emotional questions, they are liberation questions. When you stop needing love to feel whole, you become love itself, not grasping, not performing, just radiating stillness, warmth, and freedom. This is unconditional presence. This is the love the Dharma points toward. 6. The desire for enlightenment, craving the end. Among all the subtle desires on the spiritual path, there is one that wears the most convincing disguise, the desire for enlightenment itself. At first glance, it seems noble, even essential. After all, isn't the goal of the spiritual path to awaken, to reach nirvana, to become free? Yes and no, because while the aspiration toward awakening is deeply encouraged in Buddhism, the craving for awakening is something very different. Subtle, sneaky, and often invisible to the practitioner, it becomes just another form of taṇhā, craving disguised in spiritual robes. We start to believe, if I could just become enlightened, all my suffering would end. Once I attain realization, I'll finally feel whole. Enlightenment will be my final escape. But in framing awakening as a future event, a final goal, a thing to get, we turn the present moment into an obstacle. We make now something to transcend, and in doing so, we fall into bhava-taṇhā, the craving to become, to attain, to arrive. The Buddha saw this clearly. In the Anuruddha Sutta, he instructed that even the notion of a self that attains nirvana is a delusion. Awakening is not the glorification of the self, it's the disappearance of self-centered craving altogether. This means that enlightenment is not something you achieve like a trophy at the end of a race. It's not a badge you earn after collecting enough meditations, insights, or retreats. It's the natural unfolding of a mind that no longer clings. And ironically, it most often arises when we've stopped grasping for it. This is the final paradox. The harder we chase awakening, the further it seems to drift away. In Zen Buddhism, there's a beautiful teaching. When you seek it, you cannot find it. This doesn't mean we stop practicing. It means we shift the way we relate to practice, from striving to surrender, from seeking to simply seeing. You may be meditating diligently, studying sutras, cultivating mindfulness, and still feel like you're not getting anywhere. That sense of failure, that restlessness, that's often not a sign of stagnation. It's a sign that the ego is frustrated. It can't possess what cannot be possessed. Because awakening is not something you get. It's what remains when the illusion of you quiets down. This is why in Theravada teachings, vipassana, insight, is not about constructing a new identity. It's about deconstructing all that we mistake for me and mine. We see the impermanence of thoughts, the emptiness of clinging, the selfless nature of all phenomena. And in that seeing, liberation begins. Yet many modern spiritual seekers unconsciously fall into what is sometimes called enlightenment addiction, constantly searching for the next teacher, the next retreat, the next profound shift, believing that one more breakthrough will finally deliver us to the finish line. This constant spiritual seeking becomes another samsaric cycle, chasing peace while reinforcing the belief that peace is somewhere else. The Dharma teaches the opposite. This moment, this very breath, is the path. Not when it's calm or profound, but exactly as it is. Enlightenment is not far away. It is not tomorrow. It is not in the next level of insight. It is here, now, but obscured by the mind's habit of grasping. So how do we work with this? We return again and again to the present moment, not to gain anything, but to lose the illusion that something is missing. We meditate not to escape, but to arrive. We practice not to become enlightened, but to let go of the one who thinks it must. Ask yourself, can I walk the path without imagining an endpoint? Can I sit in practice without trying to attain? Can I accept that this moment, in all its ordinariness, might already contain the freedom I seek? The greatest irony of the spiritual path is this: the more you chase awakening, the more you delay it. But when you stop running, when you sit down fully in this now, this breath, this silence, you begin to taste it. Not because you got it, but because you finally stopped trying to. As the Zen master Dogen said, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all things. Awakening is not the end. It is the beginning of seeing life just as it is. Simple, clear, awake. Subtle desires don't scream, they whisper, and in their whisper they bind us. But the moment we see them, not as enemies, but as movements of mind, we begin to unbind. Let yourself be quiet enough, still enough, to hear them. And in that stillness, you may find a freedom more profound than any state, more peaceful than any bliss. Not from adding more, but from seeing clearly and letting go. If this reflection stirred something in you, consider liking this video, subscribing for more, and sharing it with someone walking their own path. Thank you for being here.